Hello. Here we are. If this were ASMR, you could hear the bag. Barnes and Noble, you get a shout out. I went to the store and I had to buy, I can't believe all the books I have. And I could not find Pride and Prejudice on my shelf. So I had to buy the book. And they only had Barnes and Noble, what's up with you? You usually have your classics in softback. And they only had a hardback, and I wanted to start reading today. So, D. Lamar, we're starting Victorian October. And the poll was put out, and Pride and Prejudice won. So here we are. We're going to start with Jane Austen's classic. I've had so many requests for this book, which I don't understand because there are some great movies of it and some great read-alongs. So I guess you guys just love me that you wanted me to read it. Hi, Isabel. Hi, Lee. Hi, Sarab. Hi, Meg. I'm so excited to read. This was one of my teen favorites. I loved this book. I loved the movie. Venus, hello. I'm sorry you have to work. I'm going to go see my dad in a little bit. That's why I was trying to get started. So many regulars. Pot of Great Games. Hello. So I don't know how many of you actually are reading this for Victorian October. That was Siddharth's decision. And Siddharth, you better be out there. Debbie, hello. Or if you just like Austen, or if you're reading it for school, but it's going to be here now. I will caution you that the language is very wordy, and they spoke in a way that we did not speak, or we did not, we still are speaking. We don't speak. Let me see what this note on the text says in the introduction. Written between October 1796 and August 1797, so it took about a year. Pride and Prejudice was not published until January 1813 in a pruned and amended version of the original. So she had it even wordier. The text printed here was edited for Everyman by Mary Lascelles in 1963 and incorporates readings established by R.W. Chapman. So we've got chronology in this particular. Is this a Barnes and Noble edition? No, it's Everyman's. This is the original 1963 Everyman publication. It gives a background on her family and her achievements, starting in 1770 when Wordsworth was born. When she was born in 1775, so it just shows the people in her time. Voltaire, that's interesting. Puts her in relation to literary context. That's an interesting timeline. I might take a picture of this and put it on Discord for Siddharth and us to discuss. We need a celebration. Oh, Lamar, I don't know what that will be. I did just put up, I'm very curious about my new poll, and you go to community and there's a poll there. And my question is, what are you most afraid of? And I think my choices are rejection, failure, confrontation, like loneliness, and I don't remember the other one. Failure, rejection, confrontation, loneliness. I'd have to go look. So go and vote. I'd love to see what you guys say. I'm curious to know, teens, are you afraid? Maybe you'll comment, I'm not afraid of anything, but mine is confrontation. I hate confrontation. Being alone, I'm comfortable with. Oh, adventure or the unknown, like surprises. That was the fifth one. And I love adventure. I don't love like birthday party surprises, that kind of thing, but I do love adventure. So I think mine is confrontation. So this is interesting. It puts it in perspective of the Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party, the American War for Independence, the Treaty of Versailles, which recognizes American independence, 1783. Oh, it goes on. It's quite long. So Lamar, we have to get to 10,000 first. Based on my analytics, it'll probably be another month before we're to if we keep at this rate. You know what I calculated? The number of minutes read, and it's like in the last 48 hours, not read, number of minutes watched. In the last 48 hours, it's been like 2 years of watching time. That's crazy to me that that many people try and learn about reading. Yay, go reading. All right. So the language is like some of these sentences are long and complex. So you'll probably see me stop and recap. And I've had students that were on this spectrum that said to me, "Why do you keep explaining everything to me?" Well, because not everybody's reading comprehension is as clean as other people's. So sometimes I like to come back and say, all those words just said blah, because they love words in the Victorian. All right. Chapter 1, Pride and Prejudice. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. So in want of in that time it means needs. So a wealthy man needs a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. So if a rich man comes into a community, all the parents of single women think, he's the man for my daughter, because every rich man needs a daughter. "My dear Mr. Bennet," said his lady to him one day, "have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last? They've rented it out?" Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. "But it is," returned she, "for Mrs. Long has just been here, and she told me all about it." Ooh, gossip. The tea, your generation says. Do not you want to know who has taken it?" cried his wife impatiently. "You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it." This was my invitation enough. "Why, my dear, you must know. Mrs. Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England, that he came down on Monday in a chaise and four. It's not a wagon, but like a buggy with horse-drawn carriage. A carriage, that's the word I'm looking for, to see the place, and was so much delighted with it that he agreed with Mr. Morris immediately that he is take possession before Michaelmas. I'm not British, but that's like holiday season around Christmas, but I'm not sure exactly when. And some of his servants, if Kelly or Sidharth were here, they would be Googling it for me and come back with an answer. And some of his servants are to be in the house by the end of next week. What is his name? Bingley. Is he married or single? Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls. One of the assignments I used to do when I taught this was to look up the value of 4,000 or 5,000 a year in this time period, which would have been 17 or end of 1700, 1800s. So we would get a perspective, but it makes him very upper middle class. He's not ridiculously wealthy, but very upper middle class. What a fine thing for our girls. How so? How can his money affect, how can it affect them? Like, how does him making 4,000 or 5,000 a year have anything to do with our daughters? "My dear Mr. Bennet," replied his wife, "how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I'm thinking of his marrying one of them. Is that his design in settling here?" "Design? Nonsense. How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must come visit him as soon as he comes." "I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or you may send them by themselves, which perhaps will be still better, for as you are as handsome as any of them, Mr. Bingley might like you the best of the party." "My dear, you flatter me. I certainly have had my share of beauty, but I do not pretend to be anything extraordinary now. When a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give over thinking of her own beauty, which of course she has not. In such cases, a woman has not often much beauty to think of. Means after 5 children, she's probably not that beautiful." So he's complimenting her. "But my dear, you must indeed go and see Mr. Bingley when he comes into the neighborhood." "It is more than I engage for, I assure you. But consider your daughters. Only think what establishment it would be for one of them. Sir William and Lady Lucas are determined to go merely on that account, for in general you know they visit no newcomers. Indeed, you must go, for it will be impossible for us to visit him if you do not." She's saying about the societal protocols. The father needs to make the call to say, "My wife and daughter daughters are going to, come visit you. You are over scrupulous, Shirley. I dare see Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you, and I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls, though I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie. I desire you will do no such thing. Lizzie is not a bit better than the others, and I am sure she's not half so handsome as Jane, nor half so good humored as Lydia. But you are always giving her the preference. So we are already learning characterization. Father loves this child, mother's like looking out for all her children, mother's a little vain, father's a little lackadaisical, getting a lot of characterization in this first chapter. They have none of them so much to recommend them, replied he. They are all silly and ignorant, like other girls. But Lizzie has something more of quickness than her sisters. So her personality is what the father loves. And her mind. Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves. You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these 20 years at least. Ah, you do not know what I suffer. But I hope you will get over it and live to see many young men of 4,000 a year come into the neighborhood. It will be no use to us if 20 such should come, since you will not visit them. Depend upon it, my dear, that when there are 20, I will visit them all. Mr. Bennet was an odd mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice, that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. When she was discontented, she fancied herself nervous. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news. So for my students, this last paragraph was very much direct characterization. So we've talked about that before on other books, direct and indirect characterization. Direct characterization, the author tells us directly. So what did the author tell us directly about Mr. Bennet? He was an odd mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice. Caprice is like, to be capricious is unpredictable. That's the word I was looking for. And then we go on to hear about her. And then we also know that they've been together 23 years. And that was still not enough for Mrs. Bennet to understand him. So we directly know about their relationship and about their personalities, because he also directly tells us, she also directly tells us she was of difficult understanding, little info, like not that bright, and an unpredictable, like moody, uncertain temper. So we learn things right off the bat in chapter 1 about Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, the parents of these daughters who, we've set up that this rich man is moving into the community, and this is her opportunity to get her children married off, and that one of the daughters is the favorite of the father. So that's 13 minutes. Let's see how long chapter 2 is, because I'm going to visit my dad after this. Oh, chapter 2 is short, so let's read chapter 2. Mr. Bennet was among the earliest of those who waited on Mr. Bingley. He had always intended to visit him, though to the last always assuring his wife that he should not go. He plays with her, his wife. He likes to tease her. Until the evening after the visit was paid, she had no knowledge of it. It was then disclosed in the following manner. Observing his second daughter employed in trimming a hat, means decorating a hat, he suddenly addressed her with, "I hope Mr. Bingley will like it, Lizzie." "We are not in the way to know what Mr. Bingley likes," said her mother resentfully, "since we are not to visit." "But you forget, mamma," said Lizzie, "that we shall meet him at the assemblies, and that Mrs. Long has promised to introduce him." "I do not believe Mrs. Long will do any such thing. She has 2 nieces of her own. She is a selfish, hypocritical woman, and I have no opinion of her. I don't think well of her." "No more have I," said Mr. Bennet, "and I am glad to find that you do not depend on her serving you." Mrs. Bennet deigned not to make any reply, but unable to contain herself, began scolding one of her daughters. "Don't keep coughing so, Kitty, for heaven's sake. Have a little compassion on my nerves. You tear them to pieces." Kitty has no discretion in her coughs, said her father. She times them ill. Again, the father's making fun of the mother. I do not cough for my own amusement, replied Kitty fretfully. When is your next ball to be, Lizzie? Tomorrow, fortnight. And remember, fortnight is not a video game in this time. It's 2 weeks. Aye, so it is, cried her mother, and Mrs. Long does not come back till the day before. So it will be impossible for her to introduce him. She will not know him herself. Then, my dear, you may have the advantage of your friend and introduce Mr. Bingley to her. Impossible, Mr. Bennet, impossible. When I am not acquainted with him myself? How can you be so teasing? I was reading a footnote, and I didn't even know when is the next. Lizzie R.W. Chapman pointed out that this question, hitherto assigned to Kitty, must be Mr. Bennet's. Oh, because it didn't say said who. I honor your circumspection. A fortnight's acquaintance is certainly very little. One cannot know what a man really is by the end of a fortnight. But if we do not venture, somebody else will. And after all, Mrs. Long and her nieces must stand their chance. And therefore, as she will think in an act of kindness, if you decline the office, I will take it on myself. The girls stared at their father. Mrs. Bennet said only, nonsense, nonsense. What can be the meaning of the emphatic exclamation, cried he. Do you consider the forms of introduction and the stress that is laid on them as nonsense? I cannot agree with you there. What say you, Mary? For you are a young lady of deep reflection, I know, and read great books and make extracts. Mary wished to say something very sensible, but knew not how. While Mary is adjusting her ideas, he continued, let us return to Mr. Bingley. I'm sick of Mr. Bingley, cried his wife. I'm sorry to hear that, but why did you not tell me so before? If I had known as much this morning, I certainly would not have called on him. It's very unlucky, but as I have actually paid the visit, we cannot escape the acquaintance now. The astonishment of the ladies was just what he wished, that of Mrs. Bennet perhaps surpassing the rest, though when the first tumult of joy was over, she began to declare that it was what she had expected all the while. How good it is in you, my dear Mr. Bennet. But I knew I should persuade you at last. I was sure you loved your girls too well to neglect such an acquaintance. Well, how pleased I am, and it is such a good joke, too, that you should have gone this morning and never said a word about it till now. I want you to notice how I hesitate as I read and kind of stumble. This is called syntax. Syntax is word order, and the British at this time spoke very differently than I speak in my normal English now, although they're both English. So I struggle because my brain is anticipating the structure of the sentence, and then it's not structured that way. So I kind of stumble as I read. And you'll notice that I think you'll notice that I'll get more fluent with it because my brain will begin to adapt to that word order and adjust to it more comfortably. But right now, it seems weird to me. Right, Venus, that's exactly right. People from the UK tend to say things that Americans, and in this time period, it was just a protocol and a way of speaking that we don't speak in. It's very flowery and it's very polite, and we tend to speak in a more direct manner. So it's a little bit hard for me, even though I'm reading the words, my brain is anticipating the way the words should be organized. Now, Kitty, you may cough as much as you choose. By the way, in my edition, choose is spelled Chuse, said Mr. Bennet. And as he spoke, he left the room, fatigued with the raptures of his wife. What an excellent father you have, girls, said she when the door was shut. I do not know how you will ever make him amends for his kindness, or me either, for that matter. At our time of life, it is not so pleasant, I can tell you, to be making new acquaintance every day. But for your sakes, he would do anything. Lydia, my love, though you are the youngest, I dare say Mr. Bingley will dance with you at the next ball. Oh, said Lydia stoutly, I'm not afraid, for though I am the youngest, I'm the tallest. The rest of the evening was spent in conjecturing how soon he would return Mr. Bennet's visit and determining when they should ask him to dinner. Let's see about chapter. Yeah, I think we have time to read. Oh, Venus, I didn't get to read what you said. You retracted it. Let me see. No. No, I want to see you. Oh, I can add you guys as moderator. I don't know what that means, but maybe we'll try that sometime. All right, well, so let's see. I definitely can read chapter 3. It's short. I'm glad after the last book, after In the Times of the Butterflies, those chapters were so outrageously long that it's okay. I just saw it pop up, but I didn't stop to read it at that point. That these shorter chapters are like, oh, that was 2 chapters and I'm only 20 minutes in. Yay, I can keep reading. Chapter 3. Time mark that. That's 2035 is chapter 3. Not all that Mrs. Bennet, however, was the assistance of not all with the assistance of her 5 daughters, could ask on the subject was sufficient to draw from her husband any satisfactory description of Mr. Bingley. So she keeps asking him, Venus, yes, I have friends. I don't have any exes in the UK, but I have friends there. And I'll often have to say, I don't know what you mean by that. Dressing gown. One of my friends was talking about being in her dressing gown and she meant her robe. And it was like very for dressing gown. Oh, that sounds like some very formal thing that you would wear in England. We don't have dressing gowns. So that was a very complicated way of saying no matter how much Mrs. Bennet asked, Mr. Bennet wouldn't give them any description of Mr. Bingley. They attacked him in various ways with barefaced questions, ingenious suppositions, and distant surmises, but he eluded the skill of them all, and they were at last obliged to accept the second-hand intelligence of their neighbor, Lady Lucas. So all of that was, no matter how they asked him, in what form they asked him, he didn't give any information away, and they had to talk to Lady Lucas to find out more about Mr. Bingley. Her report was highly favorable. Sir William had been delighted with him. He was quite young, wonderfully handsome, extremely agreeable, and to crown the whole, he meant to be at the next assembly with a large party. He was bringing friends to the next ball. Nothing could be more delightful. To be fond of dancing was a certain step towards falling in love, and very lively hopes of Mr. Bingley's heart were entertained. If I can but see one of my daughters happily settled at Netherfield, said Mrs. Bennet to her husband, and all the others equally well married, I shall have nothing to wish for. Of course, she'll still have something to wish for. In a few days, Mr. Bingley returned Mr. Bennet's visit and sat about 10 minutes with him in his library. He had entertained hopes of being admitted to a sight of the young ladies, of whose beauty he had heard much, but he saw only the father. The ladies were somewhat more fortunate, for they had the advantage of ascertaining from an upper window that he wore a blue coat and rode a black horse. An invitation to dinner was soon afterwards dispatched, and already had Mrs. Bennet planned the courses that were to do credit to her housekeeping, when an answer arrived which deferred it all. Mr. Bingley was obliged to be in town the following day, and consequently unable to accept the honor of their invitation, etc. Mrs. Bennet was quite disconcerted. She could not imagine what business he could have in town so soon after his arrival in Hertfordshire, and she began to fear that he might always be flying about from one place to another, and never settled at Netherfield as he ought to be. Lady Lucas quieted her fears a little by starting the idea of his being gone to London only to get a large party for the ball, and a report soon followed that Mr. Bingley was about to bring 12 ladies and 7 gentlemen with him to the assembly. The girls grieved over such a number of ladies, so there would be more women than men, and they're hoping to have. Hey, Sid. Sid, you did it. You convinced me to get Victober going. It's all thanks to you. So they're disappointed because the women are going to outnumber the men. He had brought only 6 with him from London, his 5 sisters and a cousin, and when the party entered the assembly room, it consisted of only 5 altogether: Mr. Bingley, his 2 sisters, the husband of the eldest, and another young man. Mr. Bingley was good-looking and gentlemanlike. He had a pleasant countenance, face, and easy, unaffected manner. His sisters were fine women with an air of decided fashion. His brother-in-law, Mr. Hurst, merely looked the gentleman, But his friend, Mr. Darcy, that's going to be a key player, soon drew the attention of the room by his fine, tall person, handsome features, noble mien, the way he carries himself, and the report, which was in general circulation within 5 minutes after his entrance, of his having 10,000 a year. So he's double rich of Bingley. The gentlemen pronounced him to be a fine figure of a man. The ladies declared he was much more handsome than Mr. Bingley, and he was looked at with great admiration for about half the evening, till his manners gave a disgust which turned the tide of his popularity. For he was discovered to be proud, to be above, like he thought he was all that, to be above his company and above being pleased, and not all his large estate in Derbyshire could then save him from having a most forbidding, disagreeable countenance and being unworthy to be compared with his friend. So even though he had more money, he was kind of snooty and standoffish and wasn't open and friendly. So everybody likes Bingley better. Mr. Bingley had soon made himself acquainted with all the principal people in the world. He was lively and unreserved, danced every dance, was angry that the ball closed so early, and talked of giving a ball himself at Netherfield. Such amiable qualities must speak for themselves. What a contrast between he and his friend. Mr. Darcy danced only once with Mrs. Hurst and once with Miss Bingley, declined being introduced to any other lady, and spent the rest of the evening in walking about the room, speaking occasionally to one of his own party. His character was decided. He was the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world, and everybody hoped that he would never come there again. Amongst the most violent against him was Mrs. Bennet, whose dislike of his general behavior was sharpened into particular resentment by his having slighted one of her daughters. Oh, so probably one of the daughters asked for a dance or came by to introduce herself, and he was rude. Oh, Mr. Darcy. Come, Darcy, said he. No, I skipped. Elizabeth Bennet had been obliged by the scarcity of gentlemen to sit down for 2 dances, and during part of that time Mr. Darcy had been standing near enough for her to overhear a conversation between him and Mr. Bingley, who came from the dance for a few minutes to press his friend to join it. Come, Darcy, said he, I must have you dance. I hate to see you standing about by yourself in this stupid manner. You had much better dance. I certainly shall not. You know how I detest it, unless I am particularly acquainted with my partner. At such an assembly as this, it would be insupportable. I couldn't stand it. Okay, Venus, have a great day at work. I hope everybody's nice to you. Payal Mehta, I really learned a lot from your videos. Can you please tell me what times and day? You'll learn soon that I don't know when I'm going to go live. There is no predictability to it, but if you ring the bell, you'll get a notification so you can come on. Lee, yes, I don't have a usual schedule. I'm so sorry about that. I work, and I say this a lot, but I'm going to say it again. I don't monetize. I do this for my fun, for my hobby. So typically on the weekends, I try to get on. And if I were going to say anything, it would be my time central after work, which is 4:30 or 5:30, if in the evenings, weekday evenings, which is central time. I live in Louisiana, so I know, I'm sorry. I should be like the people who, I don't edit, I just go live, and I'm that free spirit that doesn't plan much. So I'm sorry. I never thought about it before until y'all mentioned it. Just ring the bell so you can get the notification. Lee, I'm so glad. Are you reading this book for school? Pride and Prejudice? Let's see I haven't seen it without the cover. Oh, it's green. It looks black on the camera. It's a beautiful green, that kind of textured book with the gold on the spine. So I like softback books better. This was expensive. I had to pay $21 for it. I love you guys, I guess. Oh, I know that's the problem with my Indian viewers, that the time difference is so difficult. But the great thing is it'll be recorded and you can always watch it when you're more awake. Or this is a great way for you to fall asleep. You know, you just hear my voice lull you to sleep. The Crucible, AP Lit. The Crucible, if you're reading my read along of The Crucible, I was in The Crucible. I was Elizabeth Proctor when I was a young girl, of course. So I love that play because of that, because I have happy memories of being in theater in high school. So I hope you like The Crucible. It's got a lot of layers to it. It's got history, and it's got political commentary, and it's got societal commentary. It's got bullying. It's got motivation, revenge, and jealousy. I have a very Southern American accent, Payal. So it's a voice that will help you fall to sleep. And you can see I sit on my back porch, and you can also see the houses. I live in what's called a garden home neighborhood. So the houses are very close to one another. And I don't want my big, loud teacher voice to project. So I use my indoor voice. No, aren't too far along. Tell your friends, Lee, because a lot of times whole classes will join in and they'll chat with each other, and the live reads anyway. I mean, The Crucible, you can't do that, but okay, let me finish up just a little bit more. So she overheard Mr. Darcy being sort of rude. Your sisters are engaged, and there is not another woman in the room whom it would not be a punishment to me to stand up with. So he doesn't mean it the way she hears it. She hears it as an insult to her. He's saying his personality, his character is so awkward and uncomfortable. He's probably an introvert, that to be that intimate and close with a stranger would just be, he couldn't manage it. But she takes it as there's nobody here worthy of him. And she sees him as full of pride and prejudice. Well, there you go. I'm telling you, Pal, I'm from the deep South, and I have a very Southern American accent. And in any language I try to speak, I have a Southern American accent. In French, in Arabic, in Portuguese. It's always Swedish. My Swedish, oh my gosh, it's terrible. It always has this same long. We drawl out our vowel sounds. So an A is an A. It's A. You hear the A and the E together. And that's where that Southern accent comes from. Lee, that makes me feel good. I'm glad to know that I'm still, even though I'm not teaching anymore, that I'm still helping students. It really, really makes me happy. So we, from the beginning, see him as a man of pride. I would not be so fastidious as you are, cried Bingley, for a kingdom. Upon my honor, I never met with so many pleasant girls in my life as I have this evening, and there are several of them, you see, uncommonly pretty. You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room, said Mr. Darcy, looking at the eldest Miss Bennet, Jane. Oh, she is the most beautiful creature I ever beheld. But there is one of her sisters sitting down just behind you who's very pretty, and I dare say very agreeable. Do you let me ask my partner to introduce you? Which do you mean? And turning around, he looked for a moment at Elizabeth, till catching her eye, he withdrew his own and coldly said, She's tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me, jerk. And I am in no humor at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. You'd better return to your partner and enjoy her smiles, for you are wasting your time with me. So indirect characterization. We aren't told he's a jerk by the author, but what do we take of his character? He's just said this rude thing. So indirectly, we get the characterization that he's proud, he's aloof, he's critical. There's a lot of characteristics you could come up with for him that Austen didn't tell us directly, but we infer from that conversation. Mr. Bingley followed his advice. Mr. Darcy walked off, and Elizabeth remained with no cordial feelings towards him. She told the story, however, with great spirit among her friends, for she had a lively, playful disposition, which delighted in anything ridiculous. So she's not as much offended by him, but making fun of him. The evening altogether passed off pleasantly to the whole family. Mrs. Bennet had seen her eldest daughter much admired by the Netherfield party. Mr. Bingley had danced with her twice, and she had been distinguished by his sisters. Jane was as much gratified by this as her mother could be, though in a quieter way. Elizabeth felt Jane's pleasure. So the mother's really happy about it, and so is Elizabeth. Okay, indirect characterization. What does that tell us about Elizabeth's character? She's not jealous of her sister. She's happy that her sister got noticed. She's happy that she was popular. She feels, I mean, that tells us Elizabeth has a good character, or at least where her sister is concerned. Mary had heard herself mentioned to Mrs. Bingley as the most accomplished girl in the neighborhood, and Catherine and Lydia had been fortunate enough to be never without partners, which was all that they had yet learned to care for at a ball. They returned, therefore, in good spirits to Longbourn, the village where they lived, and of which they were the principal inhabitants. They found Mr. Bennet still up, with a book. He was regardless of time, and on the present occasion he had a good deal of curiosity as to the event of an evening which had raised such splendid expectations. He had rather hoped that all his wife's views on the stranger would be disappointed, but he soon found that he had a very different story to hear. "Oh, my dear Mr. Bennet," as she entered the room, "we had a most delightful evening, a most excellent ball. I wish you had been there. Jane was so admired. Nothing could be like it. Everybody said how well she looked, and Mr. Bingley thought her quite beautiful and danced with her twice. She was the only creature in the room that he asked a second time. First of all, he asked Miss Lucas. I was so vexed to see him stand up with her. But, however, he did not admire her at all. Indeed, nobody can, you know. And he seemed quite struck with Jane as she was going down the dance. So he inquired who she was and got introduced and asked her for the next two. Then the 2/3 he danced with Miss King, and the 2/4 with Maria Lucas, and the 2/5 with Jane again, and the 2/6 with Lizzie and the Boulanger. If he had had any compassion for me," cried her husband impatiently, "he would not have danced half so much. For God's sake, no more of his partners. Oh, that he had sprained his ankle in the first dance, then he had to hear so much." Baba Booey. Um, Bye, D. Lamar. College tour, yay. Okay, you have to help me know Baba Booey, what it means. It's got to be a SpongeBob SquarePants, or somebody knows somebody here. I don't know. I'm always curious though. When people come in and just start taking over the chat, then I just found out I can time you guys out. So, Paul, you've been timed out. Sorry, because I'm almost done. Thanks for the explanation, Nora. I like to know. Now that I don't teach high school anymore, I don't know all the teen stuff. Um, "Oh, my dear," continued Mrs. Bennet, "I am quite delighted with him. He is so excessively handsome, and his sisters are charming women. I never in my life saw anything more elegant than their dresses. I dare say the lace upon Mrs. Hurst's gown—" Here she was interrupted again. Mr. Bennet protested against any description of finery. She was therefore obliged to seek another branch of the subject, and related, with much bitterness of spirit and some exaggeration, the shocking rudeness of Mr. Darcy. "But I can assure you," she added, "that Lizzie does not lose much by not suiting his fancy, for he is a most disagreeable, horrid man, not at all worth pleasing, so high and so conceited that there was no enduring him. He walked here and he walked there, fancying himself so great, not handsome enough to dance with. I wish you'd been there, my dear, to given him one of your set downs. I quite detest the man." And that is the end of chapter 3. So we kicked off Victober, and I'm going to go off and visit my father. I hope you guys get to see some friends and do some good things. Siddharth, do you like it? I forgot how much I like it. I love the characters in this story. I love Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. I love Darcy. I really do love this story. So I'm glad you nagged me to no end for Victober. And I did see your question on Discord, but did you see my answer? Too early to be that smart in the morning, because I didn't see it until this morning. I needed coffee. I needed to get up and get going. Lee, I hope you catch the next live too. If not, it'll be recorded. I did pretty good for not chatting too much. And I learned about how to time people out that are disrupting the chat. Sorry, Paul, nothing personal. And I learned about a new meme. This book club, it is like, Nora, come to Discord. That's where we chat. So we talk about books and SAT, ACT studies and things like that. Thank you, Siddharth. I missed you beginning this much. Thank you, Payal. That's really needed. That's really needed. It's really appreciated. And I hope you sleep well because it's late. And you can see it's a beautiful day here in Louisiana. And the cool weather's very crisp and cool in the fall. Can I also? Yes, absolutely. Siddhartha always puts a link, it'll take a minute for me to get this posted, but when it does get posted, in the bottom, there'll be a link to Discord of how you can join us. We'd love to have you. We're trying to grow it, and it's by invitation only, so you're special. Siddharth, I just learned too, I can make you hold on, no, where'd it go? I can make you a moderator. I don't know what that means, so I'm going to have to read that. I could put a link. I could do the link. I only know how to do the 24-hour link. It'll take me a second. I don't know if I can put it here because I don't have Discord on my laptop. So I'll do it from my phone. I'm terrible at this kind of stuff. You're going to see the little old lady at work. Make sure you guys go to my community and answer my Siddharth. This is too hard. Manage. Do I want to manage? No, I want to, you see, I don't know what I'm doing. Invite, copy. Okay, let me see if I can add it in. I'll do it into my previous, your channel. I don't think I can do it on the live right now, can I? Right now, can I? Oh, I'm live right now. How do I add it? Oh, chat publicly. Look at this. I'm learning as I go. Post, paste. Did it come in? There it is. Yay! I did something. See, don't tell me you can't learn how to do things. Now let me close that. Oh, that's annoying. You see, you're never too old to learn something. Can you put in the comment or something so I'll download it in the morning? It's now in the chat, but I'll put it in the comment too. 42 minutes. Sorry about that. We need to think about our 10,000 celebration, maybe a live chat. That's like what I do with my Zoom. So maybe I'll do a Zoom chat for the 10,000. It's 24 hours, guys. Yes, show that. I don't know, Siddharth White blocked you for that. Yay, Siddharth, we're growing. Yay. All right. So if you haven't subscribed, I'm going to sneeze. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. If you want to know when I go live, ring the bell. Okay. I don't know how to Siddharth, I don't know how to do that. So, my daughter's calling me, so let me say goodbye. And I'll try and figure it out, Siddharth, so it's not it's one with an expiration date. Ring the bell. Always come on and see me and say, hey, leave comments. I love those. We focused on characterization, direct and indirect characterization. And I will, hopefully we'll get through this book in all of October. Happy Victober, everybody. Have a great day. And I will read to you next time. See you.